So what I'm going to talk to you guys about is how I got to a situation where I am today, where I have a political, or not a political, but a very personal belief of how we can get society and the whole world to move forward. So my story starts in 2008, where from 2008 to 2011, I went to all-boys schools in South Africa. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, being at an all-boys school in South Africa, being a sports person was a very big part of it. The people who were sportsmen were the ones who were held in the highest social regard. Now, as I'm sure you can see, I'm not exactly a small person. So being a sportsman was never too difficult. I was always fairly good at the sports that I did. And as a result, I became a bit of a socialite. I was making friends with all different kinds of people. Now, normally this isn't a problem. But in my particular circumstances, there was a bit of an issue. Because I attended a school that had over 300 boys in my year group alone. But we didn't interact. The different types of people didn't interact. There was a lot of different diversity. There were people from different religions, people from different races, different cultures, all sorts of different things. But we didn't interact. Because the cultures that we had grown up with were all cultures that taught us uniformity. The primary school that I went to had 96 boys in my year group. But over 90 of us were all white from the upper middle class. So we had a very narrow view of the world. So in our small little segregated groups, we didn't interact. And as a result, no one knew how to form relationships with the people who disagreed with us, or with people who were different to us. So when we did interact, it more often than not, unfortunately, resulted in a fight of some sort. Now, this was changed drastically when I moved from South Africa to Swaziland to come to the UWC. Because when I arrived here, I changed from being in a setting where everyone in my social group and in my community was like me, to being in a situation where there was not a single person at the school who was like me. Right? So the adjustment I had to make was unthinkable. It was huge. And you would think that this would be difficult. You'd think it would be a very difficult thing for me to do. But surprisingly, it wasn't. Because rather than getting here and hearing opinions and points of view that I disagreed with, I got here and it was exclusively hearing points of view that I had never heard before. So the whole time I was here at Waterford, I was drastically learning about new cultures, new religions, new languages, new places in the world, all sorts of things that I had never known about before. And as a result, when my 4 years here at Waterford were done, I had grown and matured a lot. I had become an entirely different person. And then, once again, like my time in South Africa, my time in Swaziland came to an end. And I moved to the United States of America to go to college. And boy, was that a shock. Because when I arrived, it was almost like I was back in South Africa. Because from the looks of things, everyone was the same again. Now, the school that I go to has people from, I think it's 65 different countries represented. So it's quite a lot. But we pale in number. The people from around the world, the international students and diverse students, have nothing in terms of numbers when it comes to people who are from the Midwest. So when I arrived there, for the whole first week or so, it seemed like I was back in South Africa because everyone dressed the same, everyone spoke the same, everyone did the same things, everyone was interested in the same things. It was really weird for me to be back in a situation like this. But being a socialite that I developed at a young age, I started to make friends with all different kinds of people again, ranging from football players to choir singers to a guy down the hall from me who watched the same TV series as I did. And I started to realize that there were small differences between people. But the biggest difference between people was their beliefs. Now, it was the closing stages of the presidential election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And what I came to learn was you were either on one side or you were on the other side. There was no in between. People weren't having conversations about the best way to move their society forward. People weren't having conversations about the best form of government that they could have. And this surprised me, because coming from Waterford, this is what we do. These are the conversations that we have. We have these conversations with people who are different to us. But over there, it just wasn't happening. And when there were political discussions happening, they were happening in closed groups of people who did agree with me. And to me, this was weird. And what happened was that separates people completely, because they don't understand where others are coming from. Now, after the election, things got so much worse, because the one side was blatantly parading how proud they were that they had won, which is normal. The other side was grieving, also normal, right? But the way it worked was you weren't doing it for the sake of being proud of yourself or for looking for self-comfort. People were doing it for the sake of trying to impact the other side. So, I admit, for a time, I also was with the people who were grieving. I was a bit upset by this. And it made it difficult to interact with the people from the other side. But then, one day I realized that this was entirely unnecessary. And I realized this because my host family has beliefs which are completely different to mine. They're on the complete opposite side. We disagree on basically everything when it comes to politics and belief systems. Yet I got along better with them than I did with anyone else in the United States. And so I thought to myself, why is this necessary? Why is it that I'm pushing away people who have the same beliefs as the people I get along with best? Just because they have different beliefs to me, that doesn't mean that I have to push them aside, or that I have to not interact with them. So, I started interacting with people again. I started making friends with people whose beliefs were different to mine again. And I realized that not everybody could do this. For some people, this was a really difficult thing to do. And I realized this when I was having a conversation with one of my friends who's blatantly a Trump supporter, and I had someone who was blatantly anti-Trump walk past and greet me. We had, about a 30-second greeting. And they didn't even acknowledge that there was another human being standing in front of me having a conversation, because that's how much they disagreed with me. So what started to happen is people are forgetting that those who disagree with you are still people. Okay? So, to try and help you understand my frame of thought, if I had stood up here today wearing a Make America Great Again cap, how many people in this audience would have instantly assumed something about my personality based on that? Okay? Now it's likely that you would have assumed things like I'm misogynistic, Islamophobic, homophobic, lots of terrible things, lots of really bad ways to describe a human being. You also probably would have assumed my religion, my diet. The world has got to the point where we hate people based on an item of clothing. Okay? So this is a problem to me. This is a big problem. And like I mentioned, it's because people forget that this is a person. They focus on differences rather than the fact that this is a person. So how do we fix this problem? Well, we need to be able to form relationships with the people that we disagree with. Okay, this is vitally important. And the main reason for this is, like I said, if you look back at the politics, there was no discussion happening in the middle. There was no drive to find the best solution. So I understand that forming a relationship with someone who has beliefs that are entirely different to yours is difficult. But there's an easy way to do it. Because if you focus on something that you have in common, then it gives you a platform to start a relationship. Okay? So I found someone who I knew was entirely different to me in their beliefs. But as a sportsman, I also knew that this person participated in a sport that I knew nothing about. So I started talking to them about the sport. Started getting to know the sport. I started telling them the sport that I did that they knew nothing about. And we formed a friendship. And we've been good friends ever since, despite the fact that we disagree on everything political. Everything. Now, forming that relationship is the most important part of this process because of a psychological phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance. Okay? Now, what cognitive dissonance is, basically speaking, it explains that regardless of how well you formulate your argument, regardless of how much evidence you put forward to support your view, if you do it too quickly to someone who disagrees with you, they will put aside all logic and reasoning for the sake of defending their beliefs. Okay? Now, when you're trying to get someone to understand your point of view, and to understand that because you disagree with them doesn't mean you are against them, it's important that you form this relationship and get them to trust you. It's important that you allow them the opportunity to remember that you're a person before you start discussing these beliefs. But it's also important to remember that as much as you're trying to get them to accept your point of view, you have to accept theirs. You have to be as open-minded as you would expect them to. Now, once you've got to forming this relationship, you get to know the person, they get to know you, you get to trust them, they get to trust you. Then you can start talking about your differences. Then you can start discussing why you disagree on things, why you have your particular point of view. From there, you move forward. From there, you start to grow, because I understand that it's difficult to have someone sit down in front of you and tell you why they think your views are either wrong, or there's something incorrect about them, or there's problems because of this and this and this. I understand that's rough. It's not easy. But think of it like this. In the scientific community, when someone does research, that research gets presented for peer review upon completion. The people who are reviewing that research rip it to shreds to find any single thing that's wrong with it. They will put an effort to trying to prove that this thing is wrong. So think of it like that. If someone is coming to you and showing you your why, or the faults in your argument, why they think your point of view is wrong, there are two things that can happen. Either you take that and you use it to grow your beliefs. You use it to understand why, or you understand why those things are okay, or you use it to strengthen what you believe in. Or, alternatively, this person puts forward such a coherent and good argument that your beliefs change. Either way, you're going to be growing as a person, like I did when I moved to Swaziland, like I did when I moved to the UWC. So going forward, you need to remember, especially for those of you who are going to be graduating and going to the United States, that you must first make friends with the person before understanding, or before getting to bed or judge them on their beliefs. First know the person, then know their beliefs. Because understand that as important as your beliefs are to you, their beliefs are as important to them. Okay? Once you've got to that point, then you can start making adjustments in each other's lives and become more accepting. Now, for me, if you're willing to put in effort to changing your society, to making your society better, by getting people who disagree with each other and who argue with each other to come together and move forward as a whole, then to me that's a sign of love. And to quote Ed Sheeran, love could change the world in a moment. But what do I know? Thank you.